All right, let's go. I thought there was a little bit longer break, but we're on time, so we'll stay on time. My name is Kirk Lashbrook. I am a solution architect for Semperis. Everybody hear me okay? Sounds loud. All right, my presentation is real-world Active Directory mishaps and disasters. We're going to go way back in time to when Active Directory was important and critical to your companies. We protected it, we were prepared, and we were ready. So here's my bio. I have no books, no websites, no tweets. If you're wondering who I am, I do have a lot of AD experience. I've been in MCSE since way back in 1994 days. Before that, I worked for 10 years for the Department of Defense doing Oracle work and Unix stuff, so a lot of experience. The cool part about my job is I work with guys like Gil and Sean and Darren Morelia, who's my boss, known as the GPO guy. I can tell you funny stories about preparing for that job interview. Up all night reading, GPOs for dummies and trying to get ready. But that's what I do. There's my overview of this presentation. You probably read it when you registered. Pretty straightforward. I want to go back and talk about some recent P1 type events that I was a part of. I was an Active Directory architect for a large organization, automotive company. Obviously, I'm from Detroit. And some of the chaos, and problems that came out of those P1 sessions. Typically, in a large organization, a P1 is declared if there's a major outage, a plant is down, some type of widespread problem. Typically, you get your SWAT team on the call, and you start troubleshooting it and go from there. So it's not necessarily a troubleshooting session. I'm not going to talk about in-depth root cause analysis. It's more about things to be ready for, things to be prepared for, things that we still need to think about, right? Even though it's Active Directory and nobody uses it, it's still important. It most likely, for most of you, drives the identity out to your Azure AD instance and all of your Office 365 users, right? One time I had a vice president ask me, how quick can we get rid of Active Directory now that we're using Azure AD? And I was like, well, actually you just made it harder to get rid of because, that. But what I always tell them is, without Active Directory, why is it so important? Because without it, you can't get your mail on your iPhone, right? You're not going to be able to get that. And right away, it all kind of makes sense, clicks in. Oh, I guess this Active Directory is still being used here. So I'm going to go over a few of those types of P1 comedic or chaos types events that I've been through. A lot of you can probably relate. If you're not the AD architect or in that kind of role where you're doing that troubleshooting, good for you. Maybe someday you will be, so this might help you prepare. That's all right. And then after that, I'm going to talk about modern threats, right? Times have changed. If all you got to do is read some of these security newsletters, cyber scoops, SANS, those types of events, obviously ransomware is everywhere. Maersk obviously has been well publicized. I feel bad for them because there's so many details about their disaster in the press, but they just yesterday, the day before, had another lengthy interview where they described what they went through to get that environment back up and running. 900 ships, very expensive ransomware attack from 18 months ago, 2 years ago. But we obviously need to still protect our legacy previous ways that we protected Active Directory from a logical standpoint. But then we also need to start thinking about, what's the modern approach? What's the modern threats? How can we get this environment back up and running quickly, right? Time is money. Everything is expensive. When I dealt with P1s on the Active Directory side, as soon as there was an impact to a plant or parts, stopped going out the door at these production, right away I had people at my desk. How long is this going to take? Time's money. Let's go. What's the holdup? Who are you calling? Who do you have engaged? Those types of things. Very stressful, and not always a comfortable type of position to be in. So we'll go over that. So quickly, my first slide. If you're ITIL or COBIT or whatever else, you've been trained. Everything is a service in IT. You protect the service. You have an SLA. What's the service level agreement? So important concepts. Old days, we backed up and protected Active Directory not only at the Active Directory service, but we always included the operating system, right? Everybody thought that a domain controller was Active Directory, but it's not. A domain controller is the operating system. Right? So in the old days when we were doing system state backups and those types of tools, we always included the operating system with that Active Directory backup. when you had to recover, you basically recovered an operating system that happened to be running Active Directory. So, those times probably have changed. Now, ransomware, everything else attacks the operating system first. It encrypts it, malware, whatever the threat or the scenario is, right? It goes after the operating system, and then your Active Directory simply cannot run. So, a more modern approach, domain controllers are not Active Directory. The Active Directory is literally and figuratively a service, right? It's a Windows service that we can all stop and start. So, protect it as such. Just like, there are other services in your IT organization, where you protect the service, not necessarily the operating system. I was in Azure subscription doing some work a few weeks ago. I literally created a VM, and I'm pretty sure it was 2 clicks. Might have been 3. But it was pretty darn easy to spin up an OS, right? Did not take a lot of brain power. I didn't have to worry about bits. I didn't have to worry about much. Boom, had an OS. So that operating system layer is more of a commodity in the modern times. It's not like, oh, where's my Windows 2003 CD that I can't remember the key to? And it was a hassle, right? So that was why it was good to back up in your system state, all those binaries, all those DLLs, and everything else. So, questions? I'm just going to roll forward. All right, so real quickly, a couple of on-prem Active Directory type of scenarios that I've been involved in. Not pretty. I promise not to embarrass him, but my old PFE is in the room somewhere. David, he was involved in some of these possibly. He could vouch for some of these disasters. But so my role was, there was a very old legacy environment, 150 domain controllers. I had actually been hired into this position because about 6 or 8 months prior, they lost their entire Europe domain for about 10 days. So extremely expensive. I honestly asked over and over, like, what are the details? What was the root cause? What happened? Nobody would ever talk about it. Apparently it was very uncomfortable. We referred to it as the Baltimore incident because it was just like, don't talk about Europe, because it was so sensitive. People lost jobs, obviously. A major production, major manufacturing company loses that kind of downtime. But literally, plants were shut down, major cost. But that was one of the reasons that I was brought in. So right away, first few days in, my boss kept telling me, make sure you protect the Europe domain because you don't want that to go down ever again. So sure as heck, what happens is about 2 months later, the Europe domain goes down. So, or at least that's what it was reported as. And this is very common. A number of P1s that I've been on, right away, there's 6 or 7 people that are like, Active Directory's down, Active Directory's down. And you're like, yeah, I'm not seeing it. I'm getting my mail. There's something else going on. So be aware that oftentimes that'll be like an overreaction because people will think because this one app is down, this one service is down, oh my God, Office 365 mail isn't working on my son's iPad. Active Directory is down. So don't overreact. What I found typically is sometimes I would be alerted to these incidents in an unusual manner. I would get to the office, have a cup of coffee or whatever, and I would get a weird email from somebody in IT that I had never heard from before, asking me about some app that I had never heard from before, and could I help them? Or I'd get an IM, same thing. Hey, Kirk, and who are you? And I would try to help them, But then a lot of times those types of heads up or alerts are helpful because they did indicate like larger problems and more widespread problems that you would have not necessarily been expecting to hit you that day. So keep your you have to communicate obviously and have relationships with other people in IT, but don't be afraid to listen sometimes to some of that background chatter when people say something's not working because it can indicate that there is some type of problem brewing. And let's not forget, if you have a lot of legacy type of LDAP applications that use binds to some of your domain controllers, those are going to be the first ones that are impacted if you have an Active Directory problem. Your Kerberos tickets are not going to expire simultaneously for the whole company. Your ADFS tokens in your Office 360, your Azure AD tokens are not going to all, magically expire at the same time where you're going to notice like a mass amount of service desk calls. But those old LDAP apps, everybody knows what I'm talking about there, right? Those legacy internal apps that somebody wrote that no longer works there. Those are the ones that are going to break right away. because those binds are real time, right? User signs in, that's a real time authentication. If that domain controller doesn't respond or doesn't authenticate you because your account's locked out or because there's some kind of attack, right? You're gonna get notified right away that that's like, hey, heads up, big problem brewing, right? Okay, so for this particular problem, P1 is initiated. Most people have an ITIL framework. They know what happens, right? You get a SIEM problem manager on that call. They start, calling in the SWAT team, get the network guy on the call. That's fairly normal. It depends on your organization, how you're managed, how big you are, but that's typically what happens. All I've heard is, Active Directory's down, okay? But different people are saying stuff. There's chatter. The service desk is apparently getting slammed, with stuff that's not working, weird third-party apps, and it's all in Europe. So right away, the number one thing I wasn't supposed to do, lose the Europe domain again, is crossing my mind, and I'm like, oh crap, how do we even back that thing up? I'm not even sure yet because I haven't been there long enough. But so that's what was on my plate. So I'll wrap this up quickly. This is not, like I said, in-depth troubleshooting. But so right away, the problem manager says, oh, the problem statement is the entire Europe domain is down. I'm like, no, it's not, and I'm signing into a Europe domain controller. I'm like, look, I'm on a Europe domain controller. It's not down. But what happens is, this is what gets sent out to every IT manager, leader, director, and executive in a company in an email saying, hey, there's a P1. Oh, and the problem is the Active Directory for the entire Europe domain is down. So right away, that just starts triggering, phone calls. I hear little feet scurrying around the fourth floor, people running. Oh my God, the Europe domain is down again, So, complete overreaction by the problem manager, but, caused an immense amount of headache on me unnecessarily. I'm trying to troubleshoot this. I'm trying to get my AD resources. We have, outsourced AD help for level 1, level 2. I'm trying to get these guys on the call, get them on the phone, wake them up. They're in totally different time zones, that type of stuff. Meanwhile, I'm dealing with constant, like sheer panic because people think that the Europe domain is down because that's what was sent out in an email. So problem keeps growing. It just keeps getting worse. People are on the phone yelling. You'd be surprised sometimes when you get in these major P1s where there's a widespread outage. How people just want to just start arguing and not being helpful. This is a good time to use your soft skills, right? Use your team building skills. Nobody on that call wants to hear how smart you are, how much you know about Active Directory, or the network is this or that, right? First thing you got to do is level set, get everybody on the same page, say, hey, we got to find the root cause of this. I'm doing this. I got my guys over here doing this type of work, right? Let's solve this, and we'll figure out what the real problem is later. But sometimes it's surprising what happens under stress, how people react. So everybody's different, but it's no time to be arguing. The funny part about this bit was I'm at my desk. I got a couple people now are accumulating near my desk. I'm working. I got 3 different chat windows open with my team. I'm trying to listen to the P1 call to see what they're still talking about if AD's down. And my phone's ringing. I'm like, New York. I'm like, who's calling me from New York? Ignore, put the phone down. And then a couple more times, and one of the other IT execs comes over and he's like, answer your phone. So I'm like, hello, oh, it's the CEO. Somehow the CEO gets my mobile phone number and decides to call me when I'm in the middle of a P1 with the Europe domain down. He wants us to, he wants an update. What's going on? I heard the Europe domain is down. Do we need to, and it was legit, but it was like, why is the CEO calling me? I'm just the AD guy. So, but he wanted to know, it's almost closing time in Europe. Do we got to start closing plants, sending people home? Is this going to be a long-term thing? So that type of thing. So, I give him the rundown. I'm like, my CISO was out there. I'm like, take this, have him call you. I don't have time to be talking to him. So 9 minutes later, he calls again. Any update? Well, not since you called last. But so long story short, manage these things. Don't be surprised if it is an Active Directory outage and you're the lead AD resource, you are going to be expected to lead these calls, to answer questions, to answer these types of phone calls from these executives that want updates and status and how long is it going to take and what's your plan, what's the recovery objective and those types of things. You're not going to be able to start pulling out Wireshark and and dipping in the event logs and like actual troubleshooting. So you better have those guys on your team. You better have them trained because so many times I was called into widespread type outages and just could barely even do, any troubleshooting because I was just busy managing the call and the communications and that type of, those types of escalations. So beware of that. Fun, but hectic day, not pleasant at all.
I forgot the last statement, which is a problem statement that Active Directory issue in Europe has been resolved.
Yeah. Nope. No. Oh, that's another case. The RCA. What was the RCA for the Europe domain crashing the other day? It's still. I never told you what the problem was, but you probably all want to know what the root cause was. It wasn't really an Active Directory problem. We had a SIM collector physically in the Europe region, right? That SIM collector was causing problems. The old ancient domain controllers that we had all had a third-party agent to communicate to that SIM collector. Because the SIM collector went offline or tanked or whatever it did, caused all these agents to had some kind of memory bug, issue in them. One of my smart AD guys figured this out quickly, right? As we were rebooting his domain controllers, trying to figure out what was going on, he started just disabling every service that he could to see which one that it was, and eventually we figured it out, right? So was Active Directory down? Not really. Was it an interruption caused by another third-party tool that Active Directory used? Yes. Was I assigned the in-depth, root cause analysis? Of course, right? But that's okay. So just a good example. Some of you have probably lived these types of chaos scenes, but I've seen to have more than my share. All right, number 2 is common. This happens. This happened not too long ago, right? 50 internal DNS zones, poof, in the middle of the day, gone. Who deleted them? I don't know. Nobody knows. When were they last backed up? I don't know. Nobody knows. How are we going to restore them, right? It happens. It really does happen. Now, granted, that's something that we've probably faced in the year 2000 that we should by now have a plan, but we didn't. So I had not been there, very long, and it certainly wasn't my job to run those backup systems and make sure that, those backups were being set up right, but I should have, because it was my job, even though it probably wasn't. So how, think these things through. How are you going to do this in your environment? Because it's still critical. If you lose 50 zones in the middle of the day, can you undelete or recover 50 zones, or do you have to recover that whole entire, domain DNS partition? Like, what is your plan? Have you thought about this? Do you know how long that's going to take? Because the first thing somebody's going to ask you is how long, and you're going to be, I'm not sure if we even back it up, You know what I mean? So and that's another thing too. Like, have one of your guys go into that backup tool that you use, and I want to see that every single partition is checked. I want to see that everything is not that you're questioning him, but you need to be aware, because there's 4 different ways to back up DNS zones, but have something. Because I'm literally on the P1 call, it was a P2, but I'm on the call and they're like, well, how long is it going to take you to get them, to restore them? And I was like, duh, I have no idea where to, who to even call yet. So I did not know, and it was embarrassing. I didn't know. I should have known, but these things still happen, and it doesn't hurt to just walk through these things in a team meeting, with your AD ops guys or your resources. Hey, hey Steve, what are you gonna do if the entire DNS partition gets blown away? See if they know. Make sure that they know that that's even being backed up or is recoverable, but it's still important.
Did you ever figure out how they got deleted, or just a mystery?
Well, it was a script, PowerShell script, asterisk in the wrong spot. Our site, we had sub-child zones, sub-zones for every site, and our sites were named like US, the country code, and then the state, USMI, ABH, Auburn Hills. So somebody put a wildcard in the wrong spot, and instead of they were trying to clean up like a couple of sites that had closed like 5 or 10 years earlier, and they ended up deleting like 50 different zones. But the problem was they had a bunch of Linux static DNS records in that were important. They were important. There was some kind of ERP system. So, big headache. Once again, woefully unprepared. How are we going to recover this? I don't know. We eventually figured it out. We had it, but it took forever. It took a very long time. All right, and real quick, this is the last one, 3. This is AD Architect in complete denial. That's me, right? So literally, our public-facing ADFS service got attacked once, and I'm like, no way, that is not happening. There's no way somebody's attacking our little, they were. And it was all coming from China, and the tricky part was they were all coming from constantly different changing IP addresses, so we did not have an IP reputation service. 13 hours later we did, right? So what was happening though is in loop, Active Directory accounts were just locking out, 500 a minute or something ridiculous. It was a lot. It wasn't hammering us. The really tricky part that I totally missed and whiffed on was about, the week before, like the Friday before, it happened like then, but they only did it for like an hour, and it went away. And we got calls on it, so everybody's account's locking out. The service that's getting slammed with account lockout problems. I'm like, that's impossible. They're typing it wrong. But it was. And what happened was, I don't know why anybody in China would be interested in attacking our network, but all those IPs were coming from China. They were all, like if you would type in, do a reverse lookup on those IPs, it was a known, risky IP address, bad reputation type score, every one of them, and they were just constantly changing. So, but literally like the first 3 or 4 hours this was underway, I was like, no way, that's not, that's impossible. So we got around this a few ways. One, we wrote a PowerShell script to unlock every single Active Directory account every 3 minutes. So there's a way to query, right? You grab every account that's locked, you just push it to the unlock. That helped. That helped the service, right? ADFS is a service that utilizes Active Directory. So, that helped at least allow that service. I was getting constantly pushed to turn off ADFS. And I'm like, well, that's a total downtime if we turn it off. That means nobody can get into anything in Azure AD, because that was our primary RP, right? So, at that point, I'm like, no, we're not just going to turn it off. We'll figure out how to Band-Aid and limp along until we can get this attack, blocked. And then we'll figure out how to make our ADFS more resilient. There was a way, there probably still is, I'm sure Joe Kappa knows, there's a way to enable ADFS lockouts from happening, and there's some settings, but there was a technical reason that we couldn't do it. I think it was because we were on the older version of the WAP servers or something, but we couldn't turn that on, the native way to do that. So that hurt us too. But, it took a long time. It was ugly. The call lasted 10 or 13 hours. I remember being on it late at night still when I got home. And eventually we did initiate or enable some type of IP reputation type service on the firewalls and stuff, and we solved the problem and we blocked all those things. But ugly experience, completely woefully unprepared, and I literally was in denial when at first, because there have been so many times where people say Active Directory is under attack, and it's not. But in that case, it really was. Questions? Yeah, that would be another way to do it, but I would have had to get that applied to the ADFS servers and everything. Yeah, that's a good way too. Just change the GPO so accounts don't get locked out. I'm a scripter. I'm thinking just unlock every account as fast as it can, Yeah, delete those zones. The PowerShell wildcard in the wrong spot. No, that wasn't me.
Everybody use password 1.
Yeah. Yeah. So, these types of headaches are real. They occur. And just be prepared for them. And I really think there's a lot of value still in just, just talking through these things with your team, and just like literally sit in a room and say, okay, ADFS is being attacked. What are you going to do? Go. Tell me. Write it down. There's a lot of value in having walked through these and not have to learn from my mistakes on the fly. So real quickly, Active Directory's down, problems, chaos, right? Oh my God, the Europe domain is down. Whoa, the CEO's calling, right? Nonstop. Major pressure and urgency. They're literally standing at your desk, tapping their toes. Not fun. A lot of pressure. Communication is a huge problem. I could barely communicate to my own team, let alone try to keep everybody up to speed on that P1 call, because there was just so much going on. I'm 3 IM windows open. I got 2 headsets, that type of nonsense. I was certainly the wrong person, to be somehow voted to be in charge of that P1 call and drive that technical troubleshooting call. That should have been somebody else's, But because it was an Active Directory issue, they wanted me to do it, fine. But just be prepared, if that is you, you're probably not going to be able to troubleshoot. And that's, sometimes that's important, because you need to be the one that, solves the problem first or helps your team solve the problem. You don't want to be driving that bridge call or that Skype call or Teams or whatever else. You probably want to be doing hands-on help with your the rest of your guys or the rest of your Active Directory team. All right, modern threats. So we got all these legacy threats and old on-prem threats that we talked about and problems that we still need to address. Ransomware is real. This is a modern threat, right? Times have changed. Just read some security newsletters or websites. There's plenty of good information out there. Whoops. So let's talk about, ransomware. Ransomware is real. I'll show you some examples and some dollar signs that prove it's real. It's not going away. Extremely lucrative. I recently read of a hacking group that claims they now have $2 billion in the bank, so they're retiring. They're like, we're not even going to write ransomware anymore. We're done, right? So it's very lucrative. But that just means other people now are going to be like, oh, maybe I should write some ransomware, right? So, it's not going to go away just because some people are either successful or retire or are no longer doing it or attacking it. But it is real. The old days, right? How many of us? I got 25 domain controllers. What's the odds of all 25 going down at once? That's never going to happen. I don't need to have any kind of plan. There's no way that all 25 of my domain, right? We all thought that. Wrong, If you read about Maersk, the guy literally saw all the domain controllers dropping offline at the same time, when they got ransomware encrypted. Very ugly. You know what I mean? So those types of attacks have changed. You got to think about these things. You got to make sure you're prepared, especially in a large environment, because downtime is money, right? Lots and lots of money. These are some of the security newsletters that I like to read daily. They come in, they're short, they're quick, easy to digest. Cyberscoop is real good. They report on a lot of threats and ransomware, malware type of issues, especially for corporations and large environments. But there's others. You might have your own favorite. But definitely stay informed, stay on top of it, because the threat's real. I'm not a Chicken Little either. I'm the opposite. I'm the guy that's like, that'll never happen, But it does. It happens a lot. So here's some stats. These are real. I'm not going to read them off or quote them. The one that scares me, right? 75% or 75% were running up-to-date endpoint. Well, how the heck did I get ransomware if all of my endpoints are up-to-date and working great? Well, obviously they're not, or there's some other problem. Right? The top one, nobody's prepared. We know that. They might say they are, but they're probably not until they actually get a taste of it. All right, bottom one's scary. That kind of hits home for me. That's over the line. Right? Hospitals now, especially just recently, there was 3 or 4 of them. Hospitals now are getting ransomware like crazy, healthcare organizations, and that's just bad. These people, imagine, cutting your finger off, slicing your bagel. You drive to the hospital, oh, sorry, we're closed, ransomware. Go to the next one, it's just crazy that, but what's happening is they're paying the ransomware so they can, provide care as quickly as they can, but doesn't necessarily help the problem, but it's certainly happening and it's real. All right, here's some dollars. Some of these are scary. Some of these you've probably heard of. Maersk, obviously in the news, been very open, about how they were attacked and what they had to do to recover. 4,000 servers they had to rebuild. That's a lot of work, right? But think about something else too. They probably could not even start recovering those 4,000 servers until they got their Active Directory environment up and running. That's my guess, right? How are you going to recover a file server if you can't even sign in to recover or do anything, So Active Directory is what's important first, and then the rest of your recovery, the majority of it can begin. FedEx, huge stock problems, lawsuits. A couple of these companies are not covered by their cyber insurance, lawsuits. City Baltimore, I thought was a really interesting one because when it first came out, my immediate question was, boy, I bet you they lost their Active Directory, right? Because nobody can sign into their email. What's the they had Exchange on-prem. What's that mean? Active Directory's down. So that was an ugly one. Their CIO got fired. That's unfortunate. Probably wasn't his fault. Who knows? I don't know all the details, but I'm just saying that's what happens, right? People lose their jobs over this stuff. It's unfortunate. So numbers are real, big, small, everywhere in between. I thought this one was funny. 400 million, it was only 1% of our sales. That's nothing. 400 million, come on, that didn't even barely impact us. That's a lot of money. I could retire from that. So, and don't quote me on these numbers. Depending on where you get your sources or your details, your information, the numbers are all over the place in the different types of calculations. But those are generally what you'll see, and it's expensive. All right, so back to this slide real quick. Active Directory as a service, protect it. Protect the service, restore the service. Stop thinking about Active Directory as being an operating system. It's not. Operating systems are commodities. You can put them on a USB stick. You can spin one up in Azure in 3 seconds, you know, VMware, Hyper-V, whatever. You don't need to include the operating system as part of your Active Directory recovery plan. Does that make sense? This is key too now. Alternate IP, alternate hardware, alternate OS, right? You know, times have changed. We don't have physical domain controllers at every single site anymore. We got clouds, we got VMware, we got this, we got Hyper-Vs, right? In the event of one of these attacks, whether it's a malware attack or whether it's some type of logical attack or corruption in AD where you have an outage, right, you may not want to recover to those old physical DCs that are on their last legs. That might be your chance to say, I'm putting this in Azure. I'm spinning up a new VMware host. I'm doing something different or better, right? That's the time to do it. So you want to have a tool or tools to at least be able to say, old DC, new DC in the cloud, wherever. New DC over here in this you know, data center, right? You don't want to be tied down to that old hardware, that HAL layer that's probably not going to you know, be very helpful. It might even fail you. I can literally say the one and only time I've ever really needed to do a legacy BMR type restore, it failed. Why? Because of the HAL layer, right? One little minor change in the server hardware, you know, it failed us. So that's important. Flexibility is obviously important. You want to be able to, you know, what if you have 100 DCs but you only want to recover 50 of them, because that means you can get your business up and running faster and your, you know, your product's shipping out the door quicker. That might be a good solution, right? Shorten your RTO. So, you know, flexibility. Don't rely on these legacy type tools the way we used to do it, you know, way back in the years yonder. It's changed. All right, how to adopt a modern approach. I've already gone over this. Legacy BMR will probably burn you. Does it even work with your cloud? Does anybody know? I don't even want to try, to be honest. I don't want to recover a Windows 2008 operating system up to a VM in the cloud. So new types of threats. Active Directory more important than ever, but it depends who you ask. I think it is. Nobody wants to talk about that though. But downtime is more expensive than ever, right? Because now you got all these other, you know, reputation to your businesses now. You know, you can quantify that and measure that. That is like a serious impact to some of these companies as they get hit with this ransomware and they lose customers, especially if they're an MSP or a provider, right? That impacts more than just lost parts or lost production. There's more types of ways that this can be expensive. And then obviously, second from the bottom here, we had talked about that. You know, most likely your on-prem AD is either pumping something out to Azure AD for those identities, their sync possibly, Okta, whatever, third-party identity providers, right? Most of our companies, we're still using Active Directory as a source of truth. So if your Active Directory goes down, oh yeah, Workday's down, and all those other SaaS apps that we have out there, they're all down. They might work for a little while because those tokens will stop, probably still be valid for a little while, but eventually they're going to go down. And the one at the bottom, whenever an executive would ask me why Active Directory was even still used, I would just point to his phone. Definitely works. They get it. Right? Oh, hey, phone. No, don't take my iPhone. So how can you do this? How can you like implement this in your environment and build your team's skill sets? It's great. Training, practice, team drills. Talked about those a little bit. Paper walkthroughs. I used to have every other Friday was a find it and fix it Friday, right? Take the afternoon. Everybody on the AD team, we're going to go find a problem, we're going to fix it, and then we're going to talk about it, and then we're going to have a beer, right? That's a great way to spend a Friday. Blow off the dust off of that DR plan that you wrote 10 years ago. Make sure that ADFS is in there, right? Because you just might be attacked, you know, and not have any idea how you're going to approach that. So, you know, go through your DR plan. Is it up to date? Are you the guy that's supposed to be keeping it up to date? You know, it's a good time to review that, especially if you have your team sitting around a table. Like I said, walk in, flick the lights. Oh, we just got attacked by ransomware. You know, Bobby, what do we do first? You know, see if they know, you know, and help them. And see if make sure everybody's on the same page. Oh, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to figure out the scope and the, you know, how wide is the impact and what tools do we have to recover, right? Good, okay. Bobby gets a gold star.
The DR plan on a domain join server.
Oh, that's another good point too. I've been burned by that too. Yeah, key your documentation. You cannot keep that on an SMB, type of server that you're not going to possibly get to if you get ransomware. So whatever your documentation set is, have a alternate place for it. All right. I thought this forest diagram was awesome. I'm going to use that from now on. It's called the dummy forest. It's got my name on it. I like that. So important concept. So if you have a dummy forest, it's dummy.local if you can't read it. And you got a.dummy, b.dummy, right? Does everybody know if you have a multi-domain forest and you lose this child domain, does everybody know you probably want to recover that entire forest, not that child domain? That needs to be part of your DR plan too, right? It's a pain and lots of headaches and cleanup, lingering object cleanup, right? All kinds of global group type headaches. If you lose an entire child domain and you need to perform an actual recovery effort, you're probably going to want to consider recovering the entire forest. It'll be less work. But not many people understand that. On the next slide, I actually have some of the TechNet mumbo jumbo that describes it, but I'm not going to read it, but I'll show it to you. So there's basically 3 types, right, of key recovery type of scenarios. Single DC recovery, important, not something you use every day. Logical partition recovery, that's just the Active Directory partitions, right? You want to be able to recover those quickly if you need to. If you don't have a full forest or a full domain down, and somebody deleted 5,000 user accounts, something like that, right? Script. That's a key capability that you want to have, and you need to know that you have it and it works. It's also fast, so it'll shorten your RTO. You're not going to be down for 12 hours trying to build up, domain controllers. And then obviously a full force recovery, that's authoritative. That is worst case scenario. That's a ransomware attack. That's a MRSC type of attack where your entire environment is just encrypted and you're hard down. You have no other choice. Worst case is you perform a full force recovery. All right, questions? This is that, I just copy paste this from TechNet. It explains why recovering a single child domain in a multi-domain forest is not easy. And you have options there. You probably want to evaluate what is the best choice or not, but it's risky. Chances are you're going to have a do-over or two. And you may just want to initiate whatever your full force recovery tool or task or process is, because it'll probably get your environment more stable, up to date, and recovered quicker with less troubleshooting and headaches and group memberships that aren't there anymore, lingering object, errors and strict replication problems, those types of headaches. But if anybody wants that deck or where that came from, you can find it easy. It's on the Active Directory, the TechNet Active Directory, how to recover Active Directory page. Oh, almost time's up. So quickly too, another thing, if you have an Active Directory outages, you might not be able to get into Skype, right? It's probably not going to work. Are you even going to be able to get to the internet to download ISOs or license keys or whatever else you might need? Chances are not. If you got a Palo Alto type solution where you have to authenticate to get out to the internet, that's probably going to be down. You're probably not going to be able to get to your email if you do have a full force actual outage, right? That's probably not going to work for long if it does work. And then all these other things. So keep this in mind. If you have a P1 where your force is down, how are you going to talk? Do you have a Zoom account or a WebEx account? You need those types of things in your back pocket, something to think about. Communication is key, especially global type teams, right? My guys were in Europe and Asia and all over the place. It was very difficult to communicate with them. And then, keep all their information. You want to be able to call them at a minimum on your phone if you do have an Active Directory hit the fan type problem. All right, so summary, be prepared, more prepared, and over prepared. Doesn't hurt. I know Active Directory is not important, but you still need to protect it. You can still get those legacy type of outages. You can still get those modern type of threats that we're facing now. Very serious, very expensive. I would always recommend, be smart, right? What's the impact? What's the most important data center to bring up first? Which domain controllers in my environment are the busiest, that have the most users? Get those first in your DR plan. Make sure they're coming up quick, right? Don't forget, a lot of other stuff is not even going to be able to start being fixed or recovered until Active Directory's up and running first. So you're going to be on, you know, in the headlights, right? You're going to have the spotlight on you because everybody's going to be waiting for you, tapping their toes. So that's it. I think my time is good. Any questions? Good. Thank you.